Getting into the media attacks, Ron Paul was pretty much in a statistical dead heat. There was only a few hundred votes difference between the so-called frontrunner, Mr. Open Borders, Mr. Abortion, Mr. Obamacare, Mr. Gun Control, Mr. Carbon Tax, Mitt Romney, and then Santorum, who's come from nowhere, and then Congressman Ron Paul. And the exit polls and other data were showing Ron Paul winning handily. The majority of polls showed that, but suddenly it was basically a dead heat, with all of them within 1 point or so of each other. The problem is that I talked to a lot of the people that were at caucuses today on the radio, and this has now come out in some of the mainline press reports in Iowa. It was amazing. You'd have the lights go off when they had all put down their ballots and handed them in when one guy had the sack, like out of an old whodunit movie where the lights go off and they turn back on in a minute and somebody's dead or the Maltese Falcon has been stolen. That was happening. Normally they do just raise their hands and it's publicly tallied. In a lot of precincts they didn't do that. They said you've got to put them on ballots, and then now, there were trucks that came up missing with 4 or 5 precincts, and we've got all of this broken down. But here's a headline out of the Tribune. One long caucus, one delayed official add up to late results for Story County, one of the key counties that had a whole bunch of precincts involved. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Fox News contributor and the architect of the Bush crime syndicate, Karl Rove, came out and said they had a gentleman's agreement on who really won that county, so you can trust them. And this stuff happened all across Iowa. And, of course, Ron Paul doesn't want to challenge it because then they say, oh, he's being a sorry sport. But clearly, where there's smoke, there's fire, and something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Here is that clip, along with a great graphic we put together of Ron Paul in the lead until Karl Rove comes along with his magic, the same stuff we saw in Florida in 2000 and in Ohio that's now been certified as fraud and as a stolen election. Here's that clip.
Romney is going to win the Iowa caucuses by 14 votes. How solid is your evidence?
From a pretty good, reliable source. They made the correction in Story County, which moved it from an 18-point margin for Santorum to a 4-vote margin for Santorum. Clinton County, right. You have the one outstanding precinct in the state, and that it will show an 18-vote victory in that precinct for Mitt Romney, which will give him a statewide victory of 14 votes over.
From out of nowhere, it's Rick Santorum.
So I don't understand. You're saying that they basically have come to an agreement as to what the vote's going to be in Clinton?
The person who's got the official piece of paper is missing. But the Romney and Santorum people who are monitoring it agree on what the number is. They apparently have rounded up the representatives of the camps who have agreed, yes, we were there, we know exactly what the vote total was, and we both agreed to what it was.
Kind of like it was Karl Rove in 2000 that announced that Bush had won Florida when he hadn't. And I'm no fan of Al Gore, you know that, but they stole that. They stole that. And they've done it again. And again, this is only the tip of the iceberg. It is so frustrating. Here's the Examiner out of Washington. Karl Rove, Romney has won Iowa by 14 votes. And this was hours before all this was confirmed. And you've got all these precincts missing, and then magically, again, how they do it is they flip the lights off, or the votes are disappeared, and then more are added, and some are taken out, or both. And if people have done this before and been caught doing it, why do you expect it not to happen now? Almost all the scientific polls had Paul winning by huge margins. But then magically he comes in third. Now, granted, it's a statistical dead heat, you know, with a point or so between the three of them, but it happened. And again, it's these key big counties where it happened that pushed him over the edge. Again, we're just showing you county by county numbers right there. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I mean, fool me 100 times. I'm brain dead if I continue to buy this known fraud from known scammers. We'll continue to break this down, but talking to Bev Harris today, who's coming on the show later in the week, the TV show, New Hampshire is where the real fraud goes on and where they've got those special voting machines. The main company that runs it's run by a convicted felon. So that's the type for fraud, by the way. So that's the type of stuff we're dealing with here. Here's another Kurt Nimmo article. DNC-linked organization attacks Ron Paul. They've got the big rhino groups coming after him, but also the Democratic Governors Association is coming out saying he's dangerous and trying to scare seniors. Hey, what's scary is the mega banks that have already stolen people's public pensions in Europe and who've said they're going to do it here by freezing COLAs the last 3 years, your cost of living expense. It is your money. You did pay into it. And on top of it, devaluing the dollar. They're already stealing your Social Security. Let me ask you a question. For folks out there that are helping grandma out or helping your parents out or older folks that are watching, you already know your check isn't buying what it did a couple years ago. They cooked the inflation numbers. They cooked the unemployment numbers. I mean, give me a break. So you got that. And then I don't have time to get into it. We had some clips. We'll play them tomorrow night. Al Gore on his current TV, the guy that wants you to pay him to breathe, he's come out and said Ron Paul's silly and all this other stuff, and had the young turd guy, the young turds, whose wife's a CPS person, sit there and make jokes about it. I mean, you've got a discredited pig, a man-bear pig, an imaginary creature, a fraudster, who, when he's not, supposedly groping masseuses, tells us we should pay him money to breathe. I mean, sometime this fraud's got to end. Now, speaking of fraud, CNN reportedly finally aired this today, many hours after it was supposedly live yesterday, but we talked to reporters on the ground who've given us good intel in the past that it was a few minutes delayed with Wolf Blitzer. And they had all these other camera people there in the same building, and that this feed was not dead. And then coming up, we've got an interview with one of our reporters got with him, with the actual soldier who expanded on what CNN was so afraid of that they censored it. But here's that quick clip of CNN pulling the plug on the live feed. And one of my producers pointed out today, if you watch the feed after this, you see a line of reporters joking about pulling the feed. In the background, you can see them making jokes about the feed being cut right after it happens. Here it is.
That's right, and we have here somebody who actually did just go vote for Ron Paul, a first-time caucus voter, Corporal Jesse Thorson, who is 28 years old, and you are active duty U.S. Army. Why did you vote for Ron Paul?
Well, I'm really excited about a lot of his ideas, especially when it comes to bringing the soldiers home. I've been serving for 10 years now, and all 10 years of those have been during wartime. I'd like to see a little peacetime Army, and I think he has the right idea.
Now, you have done 2 tours in Afghanistan. You told me you're going to go back for a third tour. I mean, if you can see your neck right there, what you have on your tattoo, 9/11, remember, and a picture of the Twin Towers. Some Republicans out there have been saying that Ron Paul would be very dangerous for this country because he wants to bring troops like you back from your post from all over the world.
Well, I think it would be even more dangerous to start nitpicking wars with other countries. Someone like Iran, Israel is more than capable of.
All right, we just lost our tech connection, unfortunately.
I have another speaker.
That's not how a connection cutting out looks. And we had reporters there, multiple reporters that confirmed they had TVs running right there of what was on television versus what was taping. They were a couple minutes behind. So this was taped to air. They were running a giant delay. We see this on C-SPAN when government drug dealing comes up, and then this happens. So one of our great correspondents out there in Chicago who had actually traveled to Iowa to cover this, he broke it down and sent us the audio that he recorded right after this happened today. And then we've got, later after it happened, Ron Paul calling him up on stage. So their attempt at censorship backfired. Here's the actual interview with the veteran.
All right, just first off, your name and where you're from.
Okay, my name's Corporal Jesse Thorson, and I live in West Des Moines, Iowa.
What is it about Ron Paul that made you come out here for caucus night tonight?
Well, first and foremost, I've been in the Army for 10 years, and all 10 years of those we've been at war. And he's one of the candidates that want to bring us all home from that war and stop policing the world, and I'm really excited about that. He's just got a lot of good ideas, and I think that he's got the change that can really shake up our country.
Congressman Ball's been talking about bringing not just our troops home from Iraq, Afghanistan, but he's talking about bringing all the troops home from all the foreign bases, all the foreign countries. What are your thoughts on that, and how big of an impact could that be to bring all of our troops home from all these countries?
Well, I think in a way we need to support our allies, but at the same time, I think that we can support our allies from our home front. If we need to go somewhere quickly, we have assets and troops that can do that, and I don't think that scattering us all over the world is going to really make that any more efficient.
Congressman Paul has been receiving, not just here in 2012, but in 2008, was the only candidate to get the most support from campaign contributions from active and veterans in the military. What is it about Paul's message that gets the military so enthusiastic about him and his message?
Well, one of the things is he's a military man himself. Obviously, he served in the Air Force, so that definitely strikes a chord with anybody in the military. Second of all, he doesn't want to cut any of our budget, and then when he does cut budget, it's going to be some of the more frivolous spending that goes on in military spending with government contracts and stuff like that, instead of cutting into the pockets of the soldiers and their families.
Now, you have the rest of the GOP field talking about Ron Paul's foreign policy as a bad thing, as something that the country should be fearful of. As someone who served in the war, what are your thoughts when you hear other people in the field, or even pundits on TV, mention that Paul's foreign policy is bad for the country?
Well, anyone I hear say that Ron Paul could be a dangerous president, especially someone like Michelle Bachmann saying that, I think that's absolutely ludicrous. She obviously doesn't know what it's like to be on the ground over there, and I think that a war with Iran is a little more dangerous than letting Israel take care of their own problems.
I was just going to ask you about that with, the rest of the GOP field talking about going to war with Iran as sort of like a game of Risk, just playing, our soldiers off as maybe pieces in a game. In your mind, is going to war with Iran a good thing or a bad thing for the country, and what would the ramifications even be?
Well, obviously for someone like me, it's a horrible thing. I have a family, and nobody wants to go over there and risk their lives. Now, for some people in political power who might get government contracts through KBR and stuff like that, war brings money, and they know this. But I think it's a bad thing, and Israel, they've said several times they can take care of themselves, and I think that we should let them. They have a very strong military, and I'm pretty confident they can handle their own.
Final question, well, two more questions actually. The National Defense Authorization Act, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Your thoughts on the whole militarization, the policing in this country? The bill even goes as far as saying as the military can detain American citizens. What are your thoughts on that, and just, the military's role in America?
Well, I don't think it's the military's role to detain citizens unless they're committing acts against our country. And, that's got to be left to the experts to really determine who is committing the acts and who's not.
Overall prediction tonight and the rest of the way for Ron Paul. If he wins Iowa, how big could that be for his campaign and getting more and more people enthusiastic about it?
Well, I'm very obviously optimistic about this.
All right, he's very enthusiastic, but we all know that the globalists clearly got in there and engaged in some type of secret activity. They counted the votes in secret right there. I mean, there's your proof right there. And we're supposed to be gullible and just buy into it. But there you got to hear a large snippet of him not being censored. We're going to post the rest of the interview. There's like 10 minutes of it tomorrow at Infowars.com. Now, here, and by the way, great reportage by our correspondent out there, Julio. Now, let's go more to the veteran and the current serving troop, Jesse Thorson, right here where Ron Paul and others bring him up on stage, something the establishment doesn't want you to see. Here it is.
For quite a few years, and you may have met him because he's been around here this evening, but I'd like him to come out and say a few words. He's been serving in the military for 10 years, and he's been overseas a lot. A lot of it was in Iraq and Afghanistan. And he was on TV tonight. He didn't quite get to finish his statement. So I've asked him if he would come out and make his comments about why he supports our foreign policy, why he is fighting for the Constitution, and what he thinks we should do. But I would like to invite out now Jesse Thorson to come out and say a few words to you. Thank you. How about Ron Paul? If there's any man out there that's had a vision for this country, it is definitely him. His foreign policy is by far, hands down, better than any candidates out there. And I'm sure you all know. You don't need to be picking fights overseas, and I think everybody else knows that too. I'm flabbergasted right now. This is a incredible moment for me. I can't believe it. It's like being a rock star.
But you know what? We're going to go to New Hampshire. We're all going to get involved. We're going to keep getting online. We're going to keep talking to people. And we are going to make sure this man is the next president of the United States.